There's going to come a day where we all are on the same page, where the sun is out, the birds are chirping, there's not a cloud in the sky, and we will do a Mailbag Monday actually on a Monday. But what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Cole Thompson here. I apologize that this video was coming out a few days too late, but I do have a good excuse. I got married a year ago on Monday, so I went out and celebrated with the missus. We had a lot of fun, and I kind of put work on the back burner. But I did forget about college football, and I'm not forgetting about you. 7 in-depth questions this week, all leading up to week 1, and these are some good ones. So real quickly, if you're new to the channel, I talk college football daily. This is the type of content you enjoy. Smash that subscribe button, hit the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode. And of course, tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, college football freaks everywhere. It's the middle of June, and we're talking about a sport that is less than 10 weeks away from kicking off. We're that sick. We want to be the #1 college football community right here on YouTube. Make sure you follow me on all the social media channels at Mr. Cole Thompson. It's the exact same as my YouTube handle. So when you hit subscribe here, hit follow over there. And if you want to be a part of the Monday Mailbag series, email me, ColeThompsonRounding@gmail.com. Just tell me where you're emailing from or slide in the DMs on Twitter. I love interacting with people via the socials. Mailbag Monday, 7 questions this week. I'm going to get through all 7. You guys are kind of slacking, so go ahead. Be a part of the conversation. This channel is made for you. I'm just a lowly servant at your whims. Let's start off out in Atlanta. Which coach has the most to prove in 2024 that isn't on the hot seat? Dave. This is going to be really interesting because I think that there's going to be people who think he is on the hot seat, but Dabo Swinney comes to mind first. Dabo still is Dabo. And I think when you talk about his legacy and what he's done for the game of college football, it knows no limits. And I think that the other part that's really important here is understanding that what Dabo did during his tenure when Clemson was at its peak might be just as impressive as what we've seen from guys like Urban Meyer in Ohio State. Partially, you can go with that Orgeron at LSU. You can probably go Kirby Smart going toe-to-toe with Nick Saban down in Athens, Georgia. This is a guy that was able to revamp a program that had high standings back in the 80s and the early 90s and did so as an interim coach. This was not a guy that was expected to be the front runner for the job. He was a wide receivers coach and a run game coordinator when he took over in 2010. And then eventually there was conversations that he was going to be shown the door. And he started to win games, and he got to 10-win seasons, and he did the improbable by getting up to the rankings and the recruiting style alongside Alabama and LSU and Georgia. And then they won national championships, and they did so in sporadic fashion by beating up against Ohio State, beating up against Notre Dame, going toe-to-toe with Alabama, going toe-to-toe with Georgia, with Kirby. They went down to the wire and were able to best teams in a route to winning titles. But change is inevitable in the sport. We all know it. And it's why you've seen really good coaches be shown the door because of it's passed them by. They weren't willing to adapt to the new style. And then Nick Saban retires and you lose Jimbo Fisher. And now there's only 3 coaches that are active with actually national titles attached to their name. Dabo's one of them. And one thing that's going to be really important here is that Dabo isn't changing his ways. He is true to his Southern style. And more importantly, he is authentic as all hell. Who he is exactly how he portrays himself inside that locker room. It's how recruits meet him. It's the way that parents meet him. It's the way that he deals with boosters. So he's not changing the way that he wants to go about the transfer portal just because that's the new norm in the sport. Okay, so now you got to find a way to win. Now you have to find a way to show, yes, you of all people are going to be able to turn the ship in your direction. You of all people are going to be able to mitigate the waters and find your path to success. Because as long as you're doing that, we really don't care. We're Clemson. We believe that we can be a 10-win roster, go to the college football playoff, and probably go toe-to-toe with anybody that we go up against on a Saturday. But if you don't start to see the fruits of your labor actually unfold, and they got some good players, TJ Moore, Brian Wesco coming on in at wide receiver, another year with Kate Klubnik working in this offense led by Garrett Riley. There's a lot of potential for this team in Clemson. But if things don't go his way, if things start to go a little bit south, and there is a conversation, you have to make these changes. And he says, no, I do it my way or the highway. The highway is going to look pretty wide open for Dabo to have an opportunity elsewhere. And even then, he may not want to coach anywhere else but Clemson. I think Lincoln Riley faces a little bit of pressure too. And it's not because of he hasn't made changes. In fact, you can make the case that humbling himself this past offseason was the biggest blessing in disguise. Gets rid of his best friend and Alex Grinch, his defensive coordinator, finally brings in a legit name that is going to demand excellence in practice with D'Anton Lynn coming on over from UCLA. But also, they have to show that they are more than just capable of winning with passing. Like, the one thing that really stood out to me about Ohio State a few years ago was Ryan Day's offense would go toe-to-toe with anybody. He'd be able to sling it around the yard. He'd be able to get easy points. Nobody was going to be able to stop the passing attack. But they were able to go ahead and bully them in the trenches. They were able to run all over them defensively. And so because of that, you start to see changes being made. Go and fix the new offensive line coach. They go bring in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State. And slowly but surely, now this becomes a program that looks like it is at its peak. There are no flaws in Columbus. There are no question marks on the offensive line or on the defensive line. Nobody's questioning the physicality of what you can expect at Ohio Stadium. And you also still have that offense that's really high potent and going to score a lot of points. So to me, the reason why this is a big deal for Lincoln Riley has nothing to do with the offensive identity. We know that he's going to sling it. We know that his offense is going to be potent. We know that his quarterbacks are going to be hell-bent on putting up a lot of points and making life easy for the Trojans. But are they physically ready to take on what is going to be the Big Ten? Because I'm not talking about Penn State and Ohio State and even Michigan for that matter. I'm talking about Minnesota, Nebraska, Michigan State. Those are schools that have bullies in the trenches that are willing to physically annihilate you on a Saturday and make you scream uncle. Do you have the talent that's going to be able to combat that? And more specifically, going into this season, will you be able to show where the flaws are? That way you don't find yourself back in the situation going into year 2 in the Big Ten. So it's a lot about setting a standard for USC, in my opinion, not more so about what should be the eventual future that is Lincoln Riley out in the West Coast, Best Coast. Last one, I think Marcus Freeman faces pressure. And I don't think it's because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's shown you that he has got this program trending in the right direction on all the areas outside of the game of football. NIL, starting to be bolstering in a lot of different ways. You also have the transfer portal. Players are coming to Notre Dame. The recruiting trail. Yes, Notre Dame has always been a middle-tier program when it comes to recruiting. They've been good, solid, sturdy. Now, they're actually getting alongside the LSUs of the world. They're getting alongside the Texas of the world. They're getting alongside the Ohio States. They're bringing in players that not only have the grades, but also view South Bend, Indiana as a place of not just a safe haven, but also one where we can win. But that's where the winning comes in. You're not going to have a conference title game, so you don't have that blessing of getting a first-round bye. You also don't play in a conference, so while you do have tougher matchups where every game is out of conference, you also have to realize that if you go 9-3, if you go 10-2, you're not guaranteed a spot in the postseason like maybe someone from the SEC is. Someone from the Big Ten is, or maybe even a Big 12 team or an ACC team that just lost on a game-winning field goal to maybe Georgia. Like Clemson goes down to the wire and they lose one game to NC State, and then they lose to Ohio, and then they lose to Georgia week 1. There's an argument that, well, that game against Georgia carries more weight than any game for Notre Dame. And to me, this is all about just showing that you are actually going to be a player in the playoffs, because there's a reason to believe that Notre Dame belongs in that conversation, at least when it comes to the style of brand that we know. The ratings are going to go through the roof when it comes to Notre Dame. People will watch the Irish just to see them lose. There is this weird phenomenon in college football where fan bases just love to all bully on one individual. And Notre Dame is at the top of that list. I think Texas A&M and the SEC certainly is on that list. I think Ohio State's on that list for some people, but they just love to watch the team squirm and falter and fall apart down the stretch to where you're going to get Notre Dame into the playoffs. Miami's one that makes sense like this. Like the U's not back, and yet people are ready to go ahead and crap all over them because of they're expected to have a good year. Until you see it, until you prove that, yes, just because if we play an out-of-conference schedule, that doesn't mean that we're not good enough to be alongside everybody else. So those are 3 coaches. I think Dabo's got a lot to prove this year when it comes to his brand of football and his ideology still working. Lincoln Riley just showing physically we are good enough to be alongside those in the Big Ten. And Marcus Freeman, not really has anything to do with his coaching style or demeanor. More so just, yeah, we are going to be a team that actually can go to the postseason. And also, we kind of deserve a spot in the postseason. Next up, everyone is talking about Texas and Oregon being shoo-ins for the college football playoff. But which team do you think is better suited to win the conference in year one? Mike in Austin. This one's actually pretty simple for me. It's Oregon. And that's not a shot at Texas whatsoever. Texas is well built to sit at the big boy table on July 1st when they enter the SEC. Like, this is the way I think the meeting is going to go. Chris Del Conte is going to show up with all the other SEC athletic directors. He's going to shake hands. He's going to be smiling. And then he's going to look over at Texas A&M and go, hi, you're going to the kids' table. Or he's going to go to Missouri and go, hi, you're back at the little kids' table. Or he's going to go to Ole Miss and Keith Carter and say, get out. No, you already took Chris Beard. You can go ahead and take your chair and leave in the process. We're that way. We're Texas. They once again did an exceptional job of working the recruiting trail. Top 10 class underneath Steve Sarkisian. Not really that big of a shock. The names that they brought in the portal, they're not as proven as guys like Adonai Mitchell or even an Xavier Worthy, but they're really good. Like, Silas Bolden is going to be, I think, a household name in college football this time next year. And he's probably going to bolster a lot of all SEC conversations. I don't think enough people are talking about the addition of Trey Moore, the UTSA defensive end that was the American Defensive Player of the Year. They're not talking enough about Andrew Makuba. Like, they've added in really solid players, and they have an identity to where they lose some coaches. They lose Jeff Choate. They lose Bo Davis, but that's not going to change, I think, the way that we view Texas as a program, not even in the slightest. Oregon, on the same token, kind of did exactly that as well. They're a Frankenstein monster. If you watch any of the programmings, you've heard me say that Dan Lanning might as well be from Transylvania because he has created a monster that is going to terrorize the town of the Big Ten. They have offensive linemen that are built for Big Ten country. They got running backs that you would find in the ACC or in the SEC. They got a quarterback that is basically going for his MD in college football. They have a great defense. They have a good ideology on offense. The play calling underneath Will Stein is phenomenal. They upgraded at wide receiver in terms of what is going to be a proven commodity. They may have the best wide receiver room in the country. They really might, with Evan Stewart if he hits his stride and actually lives up to expectations. Tez Johnson. They also have Trayshawn Holden. They're a really good overall roster, and you throw in the tight end. But the thing is that Texas, they still have some games that you have to worry about. They do. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news. Texas, if they were to go 10-2, it's not that shocking. If Oregon were to go 10-2, it's shocking only because of where is the other loss. Like, when you think about it, where is Oregon's other loss? It would be Ohio State, naturally. But are you really going to say they're dropping one to Michigan, even though it is in Ann Arbor? Are you really going to say they're going to drop one to Wisconsin, even though it's at Camp Randall? Like, I look at this team and I say 10-2 is probable, but 10-2 also still guarantees you at least a conversation starter in Indianapolis. It doesn't do that in the SEC. And that's really what this comes down to. When you look at Texas's schedule, they got Michigan on the road. They then also have the neutral site location at Red River, which, again, just throw out the records. It doesn't matter what the production is. It doesn't matter what the ratings are. This is just spit swapping animosity and pure hatred at its finest. A week later, they play against Georgia at home, so they're going to be tired, but they also have that matchup. Florida, I don't think is a trap game whatsoever, but again, it would be on brand for Texas to lose a game where they just needed to get over the hump, and then A&M to close out the year. I can at least say that there's a conversation where they lose to Georgia, they lose to Michigan, and maybe, just maybe, they lose to Texas A&M and they're 9-3, and now watching from afar what is going to be their situation going into the 12-team playoff. I can't say that with Oregon. And even then, Oregon right now is built to, I think, go toe-to-toe with every team in the Big Ten, including Ohio State. I think Texas is too, but I just feel like when you look at Texas entering a new conference where there are established teams, where there is a lot of consistency, primarily Georgia, we're talking about maybe an Alabama underneath Kalen DeBoer. We're talking about LSU potentially being really, really good. Tennessee, what's the real UT? We all know what the real UT is, not the point. There's reason to believe that 10-2 is not good enough in the SEC to get you to the college football playoff automatically, and it's not good enough to get you to Atlanta. I find it very hard to say that about Oregon. If you're 10-2, usually that means that there's either one loss that has come, and also keep in mind, if you were to say lose to Ohio State and lose to Michigan, but then you win, and then somehow Michigan loses to, I don't know, we'll throw in a random like Wisconsin on a Thursday, well, then you get the advantage of 10-2. Like, you still could go to Indianapolis. it just feels like in a head-to-head matchup, you're going to see Texas have to play against a team twice, probably Oregon against a team twice. I feel like that Oregon has a better shot of losing round one and winning round two, or maybe Texas actually gets the dub during the regular season, but then when it's conference title game, they unfortunately just can't get it all together. Next up, this one comes from Justin in San Francisco. Which coordinator quarterback system do you like most heading into the 2024 season? So I'm going to change this up a little bit and go head coach because there are some head coaches that call plays. How do you not love Josh Heupel and Nico Iamaleava? Like, that is the one where I think you look at what is supposed to be ideal situation and ideal situation. Match made in heaven. We know what a system looks like underneath Josh Heupel. We've seen it work. We've seen it at its finest. We've watched as a guy in Hendon Hooker was a few plays away in a game where he didn't get injured from leading his team to a college football playoff. And can you imagine Knoxville, Tennessee, what that place would be like now knowing that they are postseason bound in a 4-team playoff era? Not a 12-team, but a 4-team. That place would immediately jump up the radar into rankings beyond belief. They would 100% be one of the most complete rosters in America because people would say, I want to be a part of the Vols as they're coming back. Well, that was the quarterback that wasn't recruited by Heupel. That was a quarterback that actually joined the staff when Jeremy Pruitt still was the head coach, and he stuck around because if he thought that Heupel's system was a good fit for him. And on top of all of that, he didn't win the starting job. Joe Milton actually beat him out in camp, and then Heupel made the switch, and eventually that ended up paying dividends. Now, Milton, I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. He wasn't a bad quarterback, but the hype surrounding him going into the year was egregious, from my opinion. It's not egregious with Nico. Nico has all the tools of what you want to run this up-tempo, very spread out, vertical approach down the field. There's a lot to like about his arm strength, his accuracy, his touch on the football, his delivery, his timing. And this is a quarterback that was handpicked by Heupel. And there are really good weapons in Knoxville this year. And I'm not talking about like Squirrel White and Brew McCoy that maybe are going to be good, maybe are going to regress a little bit. I'm talking about guys like Mike Matthews, the 4-star wide receiver from Georgia. That is a kid that I think immediately is going to catch fire this season at Neyland Stadium. I'm talking about Holden Stays, the tight end that comes on over from Notre Dame. Like, he was a playmaker last year for Sam Hartman on multiple occasions. That's a dude that could be a security blanket across the middle for a young quarterback. Dylan Sampson out of the backfield is a really talented runner that just couldn't find a way onto the field because of all the players ahead of him. Well, now he's got an open lane to be able to run rampant all over the SEC. So I'm very interested to see what this unit looks like. If you tell me that I am getting a version of Nico Iamaleava that was advertised as the #1 recruit, not #1 quarterback, but the #1 recruit in the country in this offense, and he builds a relationship with a wide receiver. Maybe it's Matthews, maybe it's Brew McCoy, maybe it's Squirrel White, maybe it's Holden Stays. I don't know. But they start having that consistent dynamic. Watch out in Knoxville this year. Neyland Stadium is a hostile place to play. People don't believe me, but I can tell you what, as somebody that has gone to almost every SEC stadium, that's #2 in the country for me when it comes to game atmospheres. There is something about Saturday night in Knoxville, Tennessee, that just warms your heart if you're a Vols fan, and it terrifies the living dog crap out of you if you're anybody else. I'm excited to see what Robert Anae and Grayson McCall are going to look like too. NC State, I've made it pretty clear. I'm somewhat a softie when it comes to them. I just feel like that there's something about this season that really stands out with the Wolfpack. They've always been good. They've always been the pinnacle tier 2 team in the ACC. Nobody talks about them. Like, nobody brings them up when we say Clemson's going to be in the race and Florida State with DJU and Miami gets Cam Ward. More on him in a minute. But NC State, one of the biggest things that I think Robert Anae did was find a quarterback that can work his offensive system to a T, and that's Grayson McCall. They can run a lot of RPOs. They can run a lot of options. He can maneuver to the outside, utilize his legs, a little bit more agile than Brennan Armstrong like he was at Virginia. And they have the weaponry. Justin Jolly comes on over from UConn. They get Noah Rogers over from Ohio State. They still have Casey Capacione, who in my opinion is a top 5 wide receiver in college football this year. Probably going to be an All-American if he lives up to the hype. They bring over Jordan Waters, the running back from Duke. So they already know that he's been a part of the triangle in Carolina for years. There's reasons to believe that this is an offense that is going to be catering towards McCall's strengths. And McCall gets a shine on the big stage. And we've seen what he's capable of. I mean, everybody remembers that 2020 season with BYU versus Coastal. Like, everyone remembers that game. And in large part, McCall made magic. McCall was the reason why we were paying attention to the Chanticleers. And so now he gets to go to a bigger program where the atmosphere is going to be a little bit more egregious and a little bit more advantageous, but also he's going to be a dude that is going to be able to, I think, be a massive factor for this roster. Not saying that he will be elite by any standard, but when you have a quality defense, solid offensive line, decent weaponry, all you're asking for is the up-tempo, the RPO, read the defense before the play. If you got to tuck in a run, you go pick up the first down, keep momentum at an all-time high. Very interesting to see what this offensive identity looks like. Lincoln Riley, of course, with Miller Moss or Diego Paiva, whichever one wins the starting job, got to throw it on there. At this point, we can make fun of USC as much as humanly possible because if they wasted a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback and really good offensive numbers, a great running back room too that does not get enough credit. But you can't make fun of Lincoln Riley when it comes to quarterback. He speaks the language. He understands everything about what it means to be successful at that position. And if you don't believe me, well, Kyler Murray, who won a Heisman Trophy and was the #1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield, who won a Heisman Trophy and was the #1 overall pick, and Caleb Williams, who won a Heisman Trophy and was the #1 overall pick, beg to differ. And just to add a little bit more insult to injury, Jalen Hurts, who was a star at Alabama, became an overnight sensation and literally became an NFL quarterback and a Heisman finalist because he was a part of that system. So Miller Moss, I've already seen what he can do against Louisville. The bowl game is a starting point. It's not an end point for me. I want to see him continue to grow and adapt, but also Diego Paiva did a really nice job last year working in Brennan Marion's offense at UNLV. That's going to be a really interesting battle. And I think what's going to be really intriguing, how long is the leash for whoever is the starter before potentially you actually see them take the next step? Shannon Dawson and Miami with Cam Ward, this is not a shot at all at Tyler Van Dyke. I think Van Dyke is actually a vastly underappreciated quarterback. It's like Graham Mertz. There's nothing special about him, but that doesn't mean that he is the biggest problem. But for an offense that is very catering to not air raid, but there is a vertical approach, you want a quarterback that's got a cannon. And that's what you get with Cam Ward. Guy has incredible arm strength. Uncle Rico's got not a candle toward this kid. And now he gets to work with 3 really talented wide receivers, including Sam Brown. They just came over from Houston, who was recruited by Dawson when he was the OC underneath Dana Holgorsen. And he also gets to work with Xavier Restrepo. This is an offense that is going to be very balanced in the approach of how they go about things, but they are going to expect vertical presence down the field, touch, accuracy, timing, delivery. They want to take shots. They want to be the aggressors. They want to be a team that can easily go toe-to-toe with anybody on Saturday in the SEC, in the Big Ten. And when you look at the style of play that Cam Ward does, where he's in the pocket, he surveys the field, he gets latched onto a wide receiver, can deliver exceptional strikes, also some really good touch on the football. It's a really nice fit. Shannon Dawson didn't upgrade in terms of, system and overall style. He didn't really have to make a lot of changes. But I do think that when you look at what Cam Ward's upside is and what he is as a passer, it does work a little bit more in favor. And again, here's what we know. Everything that we're hearing so far coming out of Coral Gables is that these two are in sync. And that is a huge dividend for this roster moving forward. It's a big reason why I do believe that Miami is going to be as advertised. 2 more quick for you. Blake Shapen at Mississippi State. See, I'm going to talk about smaller programs on this channel. I am not the biggest Jeff Levy fan. I think I've made this abundantly clear on my other channel at Texas Sports Unfiltered, at SEC Unfiltered. I am not a Jeff Levy fan, but I do think that the style of offense that Jeff Levy runs, which is a very unique brand of air raid. It's not really air raid, but there's a vertical attachment in the wide receivers that was very well documented underneath Art Briles. There's the up-tempo attack underneath Josh Heupel. Those are things that I think Blake Shapen works extremely well in. He's good when he's able to read the field. He's good when he's able to get the ball out in a timely manner. He's quick with his decision-making. You saw in 2021 when he was able to go lead Baylor to a Big 12 title. he completed 82% of his passes. He made like the first 16 of 17 passes complete in that game. And that's a record for Big 12 football history. So you're asking him to go ahead and spread the football around. They have some good young wide receivers. You're asking him to go deep with that accuracy. You're asking him to maybe not be as much as a mobile runner as he was in Jeff Grimes' offense. And so the positivities that are on this roster are that this is a quarterback and a head coach or an offensive mind that see eye to eye. They understand what works and what doesn't. And when you have that balance and identity and you're able to basically speak the same language for a first-year program where expectations aren't to be, 8-4, 9-3. If you do so, it's great. But just to be able to be on the same page, I think that you actually feel pretty confident in it. Last one. I'm really interested to see what this offense is going to look like going into year 3 for Jackson Dart and for Lane Kiffin. It's Kiffin's offense. It's also, mixed up with Charlie Wise Jr., but you've seen the growth. Year 1, Jackson Dart was a serviceable quarterback. Not elite, not superstar, but good enough to be able to prove, yes, there is something here. Then last year, cuts down the interception rate, brings up the completion percentage, touchdown ratio goes up, yards per game goes up, yards per pass attempt go up. Well, now it's year 3. And so my thought process is Ole Miss has everything in the kitchen sink to be able just to have a day in the SEC. Like they should be a 10-win roster. Nobody is, I think, doubting that Ole Miss should be a playoff team with what returns and what they added in via the portal. But it resides in Jackson Dart. And I'm very big on Jackson Dart going to New York City and winning the Heisman Trophy. I don't know if I'm going to make that bet just yet, so don't say that I said so right now. But I do wonder if Jackson Dart can only get better. What is better? Are we talking about 3 interceptions instead of 5, a completion percentage around 72%, maybe a 74% completion rating, 4,500 yards? Maybe you get a touchdown ratio of 31 or 34. And at that point, do you even really need your defense to step up? There's something about Lane Kiffin's offense that just screams when you get the right quarterback, it is such a unique fit. To me, when I look right now at what Jackson Dart should be for this team, it's a little horrifying. And if you get to see more growth, more sustainability, more adaptability, good luck. Honestly, good luck to anybody who goes into Vaught Hemingway Stadium this year. Next up, Harry in Tuscaloosa. Who needs to win more in week 1, LSU or USC? This one's very simple for me. It's LSU. That's not to say that USC does not need to win in week 1. USC easily wants to set the tone. And right now you're hearing all the clowning from the news that just recently came out about Ole Miss not having the game canceled with the USC non-conference matchups. I don't think entirely that's on Lincoln Riley. I don't. I think that there is a reason to believe right now that the SEC is going to go to 9 games, 9 conference games in 2025. So they had to remove one. And unfortunately, they probably couldn't get a deal done with Wake Forest because they already had that non-conference game scheduled years in the past. They also couldn't get the deal done with Tulane because they scheduled that years in the past. So it made sense that USC was the odd man out, especially because of, well, if we're adding in a new conference schedule, it's fine. But USC to me doesn't feel like that they're going to compete for the Big Ten this year. They feel like that they're going to be a roster that maybe gets a few upset wins, identifies themselves as a legit threat moving forward, establishes a culture. But LSU, I'm not ready to quit. Like there's so many people out there that are saying this will be a year that LSU just can't get by because they didn't add enough in the portal at defensive line. They didn't recruit well enough when it came to the defensive side of the football. Offensively, they're going to be really good, but they're still replacing guys like Jaden Daniels and Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors. They lost one of their running backs, and I understand all that. I even understand the scheduling part because if you are taking out games against Army and now putting in matchups against USC, I get it. I do. But I also still know what Brian Kelly is as a head coach. And he somehow continues just to say, I don't care what the numbers say. I don't care what the production says. I don't care what people are talking about behind closed doors. I'm good enough to get us over the hump. And I've proven it before, and I'll prove it again. So in my opinion, when I look right now at LSU, they were willing to go ahead and be just like USC, make changes defensively. He completely went house and cleaned house, not just, Matt House. He completely revamped the entire defensive staff. He brings over Blake Baker from Missouri. That was a top 10 defensive coordinator last year. He gets Bo Davis to come on over from Texas. That's one of the best defensive line coaches in America. He gets a better safety coach. He gets better at the cornerback position. He adds in players. He does get some names. Geno Pace is going to be a name that I think a lot of people are going to know in the SEC by the season's end, the defensive tackle out of Wisconsin. I don't know if you look at LSU and say this needs to be a team that gets a top 20 defense. I'm not saying that they need to be a defense that finishes top 30. But if they finish top 50 with this offense that's coming back, Garrett Nussmeier, he's got some starts under his belt. What we've seen in advertised and in sporadic fashion is really promising. CJ Daniels is one of the more slept-on wide receiver additions of the offseason. I'm also really excited to see Xavier Thomas, the former wide receiver from Mississippi State, work in this offense. You get Kyron Lacey. You have arguably the best tackle duo in the country in Emory Jones and Will Campbell. Will Campbell, to me, is the number one player in the country. Plain and simple, just the number one college football player. Love his tape. Love everything about him. And I get that. All I'm asking for is top 50. Top 50 defense at least gets me to 10-2. 10-2 keeps me in the running for Atlanta. In the running for Atlanta gets me a berth in the college football playoff. So I think that LSU, they can't afford to lose this game because you look at the rest of their schedule, they have to play against an Alabama. They have to play against a Texas A&M. They have to play against an Oklahoma. They have to play against an Ole Miss. And yeah, some of those games are going to be at home and in front of Tiger fans everywhere. And we know what that atmosphere is like late in November, 7 o'clock kick. We know what that atmosphere is like on Halloween. Like everyone knows what it is in Baton Rouge, Louisiana when you enter the Tiger Stadium. But at the same time, a loss for LSU not only once again is the third consecutive loss in the Brian Kelly era to begin a season, it again hinders their overall potential of what they could be. Last year in a 12-team playoff scenario, they would have been the last team out at number 13 with the Heisman Trophy quarterback, with 2 exceptional first-round wide receivers and a great offensive line. Well, the offensive line is back. You have great wide receivers, unproven, but still great wide receivers. And a quarterback that might not be an upgrade over Jaden Daniels, but certainly is a pretty solid consolation prize. You add all that together, if you get a win week 1, set the tone, it allows you to kind of feel good about when you play against the UCLA. You feel good when you play against South Alabama. You feel good when you have to travel on the road for an 11 o'clock kick against South Carolina. You set the standard for the rest of the regular season. So I just look at LSU. They need to win more because if I'm not ready to knock them out of the running for the SEC championship. USC, I think that they're going to be a contender in the long term, just maybe not in 2024 whatsoever. Next up, what is with the Ohio State hype? This one comes from, of course, somebody who I can only imagine is a Michigan fan, Ben in Kalamazoo. I get the reasoning for Ohio State being considered a top team, but why is everyone saying this has to be the year for Ryan Day and company? He hasn't done it yet. What makes you think it's changing now? Just because if you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't. That's one of the biggest blunders that I don't get in society. This has nothing to do with college football whatsoever. This has nothing to do with sports whatsoever. Just because if you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't. Like the Harrison Ford story, still to this day, to me is one of the best when it comes to betting on yourself and hopefully finding success. He wasn't an actor coming out of his adolescent years. He was a carpenter. And then he got a shot to go out to Hollywood, and he got some money, and he got a couple small roles, and then he got a chance to be in arguably one of the greatest cinematic universes that has ever existed, and it skyrocketed his career. Without him playing Han Solo, we don't know if Indiana Jones is as what it is. We don't know if Blade Runner is what it is. We don't know the hype around these type of industries. So just because you haven't done it doesn't mean you can't. Like Regina King, who is it? Not Regina King. There's why am I blanking on it? Not Regina King. Regardless, there's a very famous actress that Regina Hall. There we go. See, knew it would come to me. Regina Hall was a broadcast journalist for years, and then she said, "You know what? I want to go into acting." She didn't get a degree in acting. She just figured it out and then said, "Look, I'm going to be in a lot of funny television shows. I'm going to make Cole laugh as a kid in scary movie series. That's what I'm going to do." Like that's what happens. And so I look at Ohio State. Just because Ryan Day hasn't won a championship doesn't mean he can't. It doesn't mean at all that he can't get over the hump and finally get to claim a title because he's come close twice. He played against Alabama in the national title in 2020. And then you can basically say, if not for Noah Ruggles missing the field goal, They played in the national championship just a week early against Georgia in the Peach Bowl. Like either way, one of those two teams was going to beat TCU, and it was still going to be the exact same fashion. The reason why we're talking about Ohio State, why it has to be this year, where's the flaw? They didn't lose their defense coordinator in Jim Knowles. They upgraded defensively by keeping so many players, including Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimalau, Tyleik Williams. They still have very good linebackers. Denzel Burke is back for another year. Lathan Ranson's back for another year. Oh, and on top of all that, they said, hey, there's this kid by the name of Caleb Downs. He just became an All-American safety at Alabama, led the team in tackles as a freshman. Yeah, he's pretty good. Let's just throw him in there and figure it out later. That's the defense. Offensively, Emeka Egbuka didn't go anywhere. People kind of forget how talented of a wide receiver he is. Like, the guy can boot, scoot, and boogie in the open field. And he was a really talented playmaker opposite of Marvin Harrison Jr. with C.J. Stroud. They also get Jeremiah Smith, the #1 wide receiver recruit. Carnell Tate is a really good up-and-coming talent that I think is going to be that wide receiver 2 this season. They have a solid offensive line. It's not one of the best in college football. I'll give you that. It's not one of the best, but I'm not nervous would be the best way to put it. Like if you told me that I was starting a club and they said, here's going to be your offensive line, Ohio State, like randomly, I'll make it work. I'll be fine. I have one of the best running backs in the country in Travion Henderson. Oh, and just for good measure, I want to add in Quinshon Judkins, the best running back in the SEC, who just went up against toe-to-toe competition every single Saturday that is as talented, if not more talented, than what he'll face here. We didn't need him. Oh, no. We didn't need him at all. We just want it. So we're going to get him. And then you go look at the quarterback situation. I don't know if Will Howard is going to be the elite playmaker. I think he's the right choice. I'll be completely transparent. I think he's an upgrade, especially now in this offense led by Chip Kelly, who also just randomly decided to leave his post as a head coach and go to Ohio State to call plays. Like, when was the last time you heard of that happening? That's Chip Kelly. He's coming on over. And now I think it's a good fit for what Will Howard needs to improve on. But honestly, you could throw any one of the 5 quarterbacks back there. And yes, 5. And I would expect great results. Julian Sain, people are talking about him like he is the second coming of C.J. Stroud up in Columbus. There's reasons to believe that, yes, if there is any bit of trepidation, if there is any bit of concern or a setback with Will Howard, he's going to get a shot to take over as QB1 right away. I think the same thing kind of goes for if you need to start Aaron Nolan in a pinch. I think that if you turn to Devin Brown, it's not the worst thing possible. Lincoln Kienholz, again, that's another player that if you take out that bowl game, we have a completely different opinion of him. So the reason why I say, and many of us are saying, it feels like it has to be natty or bust this year for Ohio State. Where is the question mark for this team? The schedule bodes extremely well in their favor. Yeah, they got to go play against Oregon. Yes, they have to go play against Michigan. But it's a 12-team playoff. You're not screwed if you lose those games. In fact, I would say probably if you lose those games and as long as you go to to Indianapolis, you're still in the postseason. Not to mention, you get Iowa at home and you get Penn State on the road. But Penn State, we know what they are. We've seen it year in and year out, and that's Penn State's only big game. And if they don't win that one, again, here we are talking about what happens. Ohio State was able to last season with inadequate quarterback play trust Marvin Harrison Jr. to beat the Nittany Lions at home. You don't think for 1 second that they could do the exact same thing, but instead just pull a Michigan, run it the entire second half with not 1, but 2 all potentially All-American running backs? There's not a question mark there. That's the reason why when you talk about Ohio State, it feels like it has to be championship or bust. And the good news is, I don't think that there's really anything standing in their way. Like if you look in years past, Ryan Day's been able to say, this is where the heartbreak comes. This is where we are prepared. We don't know how to handle this moment. They lost to Michigan last year for the 3rd time consecutively. And then on top of that, they allow Missouri to take over a game down in Arlington. I don't care about opt-outs. Nobody cares about opt-outs. You're Ohio State. And you lose, and you don't even score a touchdown. They know what embarrassment feels like. They know what it's like to not be considered the favorites. They know what it's like to not be the best of the bunch in college football. They don't know what it means to go through any of this shit anymore. Everything is understood. They get what they are. They know what their identity is. They understand who they are as a team. top to bottom, when you look at this roster, there's not a flaw. And internally, there's an expectation that they know that they have to meet a standard. So it feels like it's a bust this year. It has to be, because there's no reason why they shouldn't be in that conversation. And again, just because you haven't done something doesn't mean you can't. Just because Ryan Day hasn't claimed a national title doesn't mean that he is not a national championship caliber coach. Two more for you. With the game being a month away, what are automatic ban teams for your list in EA College Football 25 when it comes to Dynasty mode? This one's going to be a really fast segment. By the way, Joe in Los Angeles, thank you for the question. Any team that's a blue blood, I'm sorry, I just don't trust you. It's like whenever I go out with people and they want to go home after the first beer, like, I just don't trust you. I don't. What are you doing? Like, just have some fun. You got the babysitter. You don't have to worry about anything going on in your life. Just sit back, relax, have another brewski. Let's just chill and enjoy our time off. Let's go back to acting like that we were young adolescents. It's the same way with EA College Football. What's the fun in creating a dynasty with a dynasty like Alabama? And I get it. No more Nick Saban. Saban's gone. But there's still Alabama. It's still Tuscaloosa. It's still Bryant-Denny Stadium. It's still Jalen Milroe. It's still this defense. It's still this talented cast of players that you wouldn't see at Eastern Michigan, and you wouldn't see at Western Kentucky, and you wouldn't see at Western Michigan. So what's the fun in that? What's the fun in playing at LSU? What's the fun in playing at even, I would say, Oregon, which has a great atmosphere? I'd go Oklahoma State for that matter. Most Power 5 programs, Power 4 programs, whatever really you want to say, there's not a great atmosphere because of you can see it happening. Like, do me a favor. In a 12-team playoff where one Group of 5 school gets in, you start off with Toledo. That is your dynasty team. Do you actually believe that Jason Candle and the Rockets will eventually win a national title in this era of college football? No, probably not. You'll be lucky to get out of the first round because if you're probably going to be the 12th seed, and that 5 seed is probably coming from the SEC or the Big Ten as the loser of the conference championship game. Like, that's who you get to play week 1. So consider that your national championship in the postseason. But in the game, all bets are off. You got the sticks and you know how to move and groove. You're good. The Rockets are taking flight and they are immediately going to Atlanta every single year, or they're going to Indianapolis or Houston or Miami or wherever the championship game is. And you're creating a program that is going to start landing 5 stars. You're eventually going to get phone calls from the Big Ten. You're going to get phone calls from the ACC. Hey, you want to join our conference where we'll give you really good revenue? We'll find a way to kick somebody out just to bring you on in. And isn't that the beauty of the game? Like, the beauty to me is playing in the Sun Belt or MACtion, Tuesday Night Football. That's when you know you're a college football sicko. When there are other events going on in your life, when there are things to do, and it is 9:30 at night, and you're watching Bowling Green versus Buffalo in the 4th quarter, and it is a must-win drive for the Hawks or for the Bison, and you're just like, that's my life. This is what I come here for. So why would you play a video game without it? The automatic ban team for me is just any major Power 5 program. I'll give you a few that I would say you keep. Colorado, but again, it's Colorado. I don't really think it has anything to do with Dion. It's just they've been such a lackluster program for years. Kansas, I do have a little bit of trepidation with this one, and the main reason why is because Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, really talented team going into this year. But for most years, they have been a constant just laughing stock throughout college football. Nebraska, I will give you Nebraska. Because even though, yeah, they are turning the corner, they had a top 40 defense last year underneath Tony White, they've been a dumpster fire since the last days of Bo Pelini. Like, they honestly thought, hey, we're going to move off Bo Pelini and things are going to get better. No, you immediately downtrodden, and it has been a complete and total cluster mess for years. Vanderbilt, if you win at Vanderbilt, you might as well just say that you're winning at Swanee. You're winning at Kennesaw State. You're winning at, I don't know, we'll throw in Georgia State for that matter. It's at like that level. And then I'll also throw in Virginia because honestly, I love Tony Elliott. I thought that he was a great hire at the time. It's just one of those things where it feels like Charlottesville, you're just never going to get past the hump. Like that one great season with Bronco Mendenhall where he took him to the Orange Bowl, that might be peak version of what you get in Virginia. But that's about it when it comes to Group of 5, when it comes to Power 4 programs that I actually think are fair to the game. One more, Say you could add one team in every major conference in 2025. Which teams are you placing in the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12? Dustin in Houston. Thank you for this one, Dustin. Let's start with the ACC because I'd make a trade. I would just make this trade immediately for me. I'm giving SMU to the Big 12. And if I am the ACC, I'm asking for West Virginia. Because then I get the backyard brawl and it means something more. So those of you that don't know, the backyard brawl is one of the best games in college football that does not get talked about enough. Pittsburgh versus West Virginia. It is such a great atmosphere when the game is in Morgantown. I don't like it when it's at Heinz Field only because I don't like it in NFL stadiums. That's an argument for another day. But Pat Narduzzi versus Neil Brown, I want that game to have a little bit more than just hostility between border states. Like I want that to have meaning in the biggest matchup when it comes to the ACC. And can you imagine we get the backyard brawl like 3 times a year? We get it one time when they play against each other. Potentially we get it in the ACC title game in Charlotte. And you know that both the Panthers and the Mountaineers would travel in droves to Charlotte, North Carolina and Bank of America Stadium. And what if we got it in the postseason? Like I get the backyard brawl the same way I get the Iron Bowl, the game, Army versus Navy, third Saturday in October, like those rivalries. I would love it. And then geographically, just be real for a second. Like the ACC want added more teams because if they had to be a part of the mix with the Big 10, the Big 12, and the SEC. But like geographically, where does SMU make sense in any of that? You know where it does? The Big 12, where Texas Tech resides, where you'd get the battle of the Iron Skillet. And that against TCU, crosstown rivals, especially with Sonny Dykes still there, that now has conference complications. That still has conference negotiations. You got Baylor. That's a game where it's the rich versus the rich. You got a game against Texas Tech. You got games everywhere littered across the state. Plus, you get Oklahoma in the mix. You also get to throw in a few other teams that are really fun. Like, that just makes more sense. So, that's not my pick for the Big 12, but for the ACC, I am giving the Mustangs back to the conference that is near and heart to the Southwest Classic, and I'm taking West Virginia. I want to have the backyard brawl. In the Big 12, I'm just going to finish off the catechism. Let's just say that West Virginia says, thanks, but no thanks. We're good. We want to be a part of this conference. It's fun. It's awesome. Go ahead and add in one more just weird random team that's out in the middle of nowhere. I know that I should be saying Oregon State or Washington State. I want Boise State. Boise State, the only reason why we don't talk about them as a prominent team is because they have the Group of 5 logo. Like for years, I've talked about Houston being this way, and I've talked about BYU being this way, and I've talked about what UCF was during their time in the AAC. And now we're talking a little bit about Tulane and what they're now doing in Memphis, and their programs that if they just had a little bit more respect, just a little bit bigger backing, we would be regarding them as a great program. Not a good one, not a solid one, a great one. They got the atmosphere. You go to the blue turf, people are going to want to go travel and see it. Like there will be people throughout this conference, the best conference in my opinion in college football for fun, atmosphere, just actual college pageantry. There will be people that will make the trip to Boise, Idaho to see that field. The Broncos, they can go toe-to-toe with teams on the regular. They're going to be going up against Oregon in week 2. As much as I think Oregon wins that game, I'm not ready to say that that's going to be a complete and total blowout. I think Malachi Nelson's got something. Spencer Danielson, there's a lot to like about what he's brought in via the portal. There's a lot to like what he's doing when it comes to the recruiting aspect of things. And again, now you're basically all throughout the country. You got a team that travels all the way out to Morgantown, West Virginia, and on the flip side of the country, Boise, Idaho, and then Texas is mixed in, and Arizona's mixed in, and Colorado's mixed in, and you throw in a little bit of Oklahoma, and then you throw in Iowa for that matter. They're everywhere. They're littered everywhere. So to me, it just makes the most sense. SEC, I want a team from North Carolina. That's all I want. You can decide which one you want to go with. Is it NC State? Is it UNC? Is it Duke? It's just weird, isn't it? Like the entire Southeastern region, and if you include the Southeast, I would say North Carolina is probably that last line. That is to where I draw the Southern region. Virginia right above it. There's parts that are Southern. There's parts that I wouldn't say are Midwest, but they're not Northern either. It's like the colonial aspect. Like it's the one state that's like colonial. Sure, we'll just go with that. That's a good way to put it. But like North Carolina is the one state that does not have representation in the Southeastern region. And the SEC network is based in Charlotte. So how do you not add at least one North Carolina team? And then you get everywhere covered. Tennessee's covered, Kentucky's covered, South Carolina's covered, Florida's covered, Georgia's covered, Alabama's covered, Louisiana's covered, Mississippi's covered. You throw in Arkansas, you have Missouri that's somehow part of the South region now, I guess. Oklahoma's now in this for some reason. So it's everywhere in that region you got covered. I would personally take NC State. And the reason why is because UNC would not want to go because of basketball. Duke basically would turn into Vanderbilt 2.0. You don't need that football. And that's not an insult to Duke. I love Manny Diaz and what he's building there, just like what Mike Elko was starting to build there after replacing David Cutcliffe. But let them just stay there. NC State's good at everything. They're not elite at everything. And to me, that's a big reason why I think that you could see that happen. In baseball, they would always be in the running for the College World Series. Basketball, they would always be in the running for the tournament. Football, they would always be bowl eligible because they always have been. You also throw in the other sports such as swimming and diving. You throw in also women's basketball. You throw in soccer. Like, they would have representation outside of just football, and they're good. They're just good across the board. There's not one sport that they're bad at. So you throw that in the SEC. It's like right alongside Texas A&M. It's right alongside Kentucky. It's right alongside potentially Arkansas for football, for basketball and baseball. It's right alongside, I would say, probably Ole Miss when it comes to football every few years. They're going to break out. Missouri, it's a good compliment too. So why not just add an NC State? They're like the forgotten brother of the ACC. Nobody wants to respect them there. Maybe they'll garner a little bit of respect. And Raleigh, North Carolina is a safe haven and a masterpiece that comes when we talk about the Southern region, especially in North Carolina. Big Ten, easy one, Notre Dame. Just add in Notre Dame because you already feel like a Big Ten program. The bodies, the bulliness, the atmosphere of Notre Dame Stadium. South Bend is in the heart of where the Big Ten is. There's a lot of fans that love Chicago, that live in Chicago, that are massive Fighting Irish folks. You have the headquarters there, and then you get to have no argument about the conference. Like, nobody would argue Notre Dame goes toe-to-toe with teams that they play in the Big Ten because they do every single year. It's them and the ACC mixed in with a little bit of Pac-12. Who's going to argue with you about your scheduling? Because that's the entire argument with Notre Dame right now. They don't play in a conference. They don't have a game. They don't know what they're doing. So it's like, what are we talking about? I'm not sure because they literally schedule games every single year. They have such an easy schedule. They every year rank inside the top 20 of toughest schedules in college football. What the hell are you talking about? But instead, you take out a game that was supposed to be against Virginia, and maybe now you throw in Minnesota. Or you take out a game that was supposed to be against Oregon State when the Pac-12 existed, and now you schedule a Michigan State. Or you take out a Stanford matchup, which was a decent rivalry that doesn't get talked about enough, and instead you schedule Rutgers. And then at that point, it's kind of the same, but the games now have meaning and backing when it comes to the conference alignment. They have a shot at playing in the conference title game in Indianapolis, which is right up the road from South Bend, Indiana, and Indianapolis. So it's like, what are we doing here? Makes the most sense. And at that point also, you get to have kind of that big branding. Because the one thing that the SEC does have right now, yeah, Oregon's going to carry a lot of weight. USC is going to carry a lot of weight. But like, where's that extra team? Like Texas, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee belongs there. Most people know what that big orange T stands for. Florida gets mixed in there. You want that big branded team. That's Notre Dame, in my opinion. There you go. Mailbag Monday on a Wednesday. I know. I'm sorry. Happy anniversary to my wife. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the ring notification. That way you don't miss a single episode of Just Saying It. Subscribe to the channel. Tell your friends, family, mortal enemies, best of bros, college football sickos everywhere. Because we're talking about our favorite sport leading up to week 1 and well throughout the chaotic 2024 season. Make sure that also you follow me on social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at Mr. Cole Thompson. And if you want to be a part of the Monday Mailbag series, make sure that you are following me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson, slide in the DMs, or email me, ColeThompsonWriting@gmail.com. Until next time, folks, I am Cole Thompson. Later. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. That's awesome. Thank you so much. But before you leave, make sure that you hit subscribe. And if you want to check out any of our other great work, make sure you click on one of the videos here. Am I pointing at the right spot? I'm not entirely sure. I'm really not.